Hey, it's Megan, and I am back with, I guess, part 2 of this video. Apparently I didn't have enough space on my phone, and I don't want to refilm it, so I will just be starting off with this second bookcase. So this bookcase essentially has mostly romance on it, and primarily fantasy in some form. So without further ado, let's just get talking. Up top is JD Robb, which is the pen name of Nora Roberts. This is a super long series called the End Death series. It's about Eve Dallas and her eventual husband, Rourke, and it's a futuristic police procedural drama. It's really good. It I've only read like the first 10 books, but you know, when you have spending habits, you just keep buying books that you haven't read, right? Eventually, I will get to them. The next series is Karen Marie Moning. Y'all have heard me talk about her a lot already. So, this series, I'm missing one of them, but Spell of the Highlander through Beyond Highland Mist and the Immortal Highlander over here are all a part of her Highlander series. I know, super simple name, but basically, there's always a female time traveling in it, and it's just really cute, cheesy romance. But some of the after or starting with book 3, which is the book that I'm missing on my shelves, you start to see that there's background plot building that then bleeds into Spell of or not Spell, but into the Fever series. So it's kind of like all of these books are a different couple getting together and they all stand alone well enough on their own, but there is a reading order. And so it's kind of like these happen and then splits over here to the Fever series, which becomes super, super dark. Dark themes are covered, but it's really, really well done. The Fever series is about Michaela Lane, Mac for short, and you realize that she's she she seer. I think that's how it's pronounced. Basically, she can see the Fae, and that's something that she has to keep hidden. And she starts to work with this guy, Jericho Barons, and they have to find this evil book to prevent the apocalypse. And then drama ensues. Obviously, I really love it because I have all the books, and man, the story arcs that these characters take, it is heartbreaking, but so good. Then probably my favorite urban fantasy series is the Mercy Thompson World by Patricia Briggs. So I have all of them in paperback and in hardback. I also have them stored in chronological order, so you'll see the Alpha and Omega series mixed in, because to me that makes the best reading experience. And I also have the some of the graphic novel, like this is Moon Called, which is just essentially Moon Called the book in graphic novel form, but there's Homecoming, which is a prequel series, and then what's this one called? Hopscotch Jilly, which is like essentially a short story that was made into a graphic novel. And then Shifting Shadows is basically all of her short stories that would have been in those anthology books bound into one. If you don't already know about Mercy Thompson, it's urban fantasy. The Fae are out to the world. They came out in like what would have been the 80s, and you over the course of the series, werewolves come out, and Mercy kind of is at the root of a lot of drama and intrigue, and she's a coyote shapeshifter. Super funny, really interesting series. And then we have Anne Bishop, who wrote the other series. I haven't read any of her other works, but I do love this other series. This is urban fantasy again. It is but it's a flip. And I've talked about it before in my my top 5 Wednesday urban fantasy video. So I will link that below, which will give you more detail about a couple of these other series. And instead of the humans being in charge, the creatures are in charge. And Lake Silence is a spin-off. So the first 5 books are basically a complete story arc, and then Lake Silence starts another one. I highly recommend it if you enjoy urban fantasy. And then I have Nalini Singh's book, Angel's Blood. I believe this is the first in a book about angels and demons. It was one of those freebie books I got, and I've heard really, really good things about Nalini Singh. I hope I'm saying her name right. I've just never got around to reading her yet. Eventually, I will. And then J.R. Ward, she's one of those authors that is always recommended, right alongside Christine Feehan and Sherilyn Kenyon, and so is Nalini Singh. So I have the first book, haven't picked it up. The other books I've read by her, the Bourbon King series, I thought I would really love that, but I read the first 2, and I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever read the third one, so it's made me kind of hesitant to pick up this book, even though I've heard amazing things about this. So we'll see. And then I have Ilona Andrews, the best husband and wife writing team ever. And this is their Kate Daniels series. Again, that should be in the urban fantasy top 5 Wednesday video, so I won't go into too much detail, just know that this is one of my favorites. Okay, I'm gonna sit down. And then also for Ilona Andrews, we have the Hidden Legacy series, which is the first 3 books that are out. I hope they keep continuing them. And then the Edge series, which is a 4-book series. Apparently there's a slight tie-in to her online series, The Innkeeper Chronicles, so I'm pretty excited to read that. And it kind of has like a fae-ness to it. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to figure it out. And then we have Maggie Shane, and these are the first books in series, each one of them. And I bought them for really cheap at her. She was at the event where I got a lot of the other free books. I've just not picked them up. I don't know why. I've heard that she's an amazing author as well, and I just need to do it. This book by Jill Chavez, Rumor Has It, another one of those free books that I got in the goodie bag. It's a contemporary. I might or might not read them. And then we have Charlaine Harris, the I think this is called the Crossroads series. I love True Blood, the TV series. I never read the book, so I figured I probably want to read something else first so that I'm not comparing the TV series to the book so much, because from what I understand, they are vastly different. So one day I will read these. And they actually got turned into a TV series as well, but the plan is to read the books first. And then I have C.L. Wilson. I really love this author. She is really good. I have read the first 3 books in this series, which kind of is medieval fantasy. Yeah, it's kind of medieval fantasy. And it has to deal with some shape-shifting as well, too. It's not like anything else I've read, and I can't explain it very well, so I'm gonna just leave the Goodreads description to the first book, and if you are interested in that, pull it up and read it. And then her other 2 books, The Winter King and The Sea King. The Winter King was amazing. Again, kind of like that medieval fantasy feel to it. Callison, I think, is Camson, I think, is the female's name. And she basically is pawned off to marry the Winter King, who is this terrifying monstrosity of a man. It's almost like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, because he is a freaking asshole when you first get to meet him and them learning who they are together. But man, when they get together, it is amazing. The Sea King is about her sister. She has like 4 sisters, and then her relationship with her arranged marriage. Because, and all the sisters basically represent a season. So there's 4 sisters that represent the classical seasons, and Callison was kind of like an oops child. And so there's a lot of drama related around that. Really, really good. C.L. Wilson, awesome author. And then we have, I don't even remember what this series is called. It's by Yasmin Gillorn. Man, what is this series called? I guess this The Otherworld. I guess is another one called the Otherworld series. Yeah, it's the Otherworld. Okay. So it follows 3 sisters. Each book is from a different sister's perspective. So you have a witch, a changeling, which she's a cat shapeshifter. She literally shapeshifts into a tabby. And then a darkling. So she's a vampire. She wasn't born a vampire. She was changed because she was attacked very violently, and it explains that. But they are all half fae and half human, and so their human half basically short circuits their magic abilities. So there's a lot of humor, but there is that very like kind of adult serious topics about like abuse and things that happen to certain sisters. And so basically each 3 books is like a trilogy within itself. And this is a really long series, but I only have the first 7. I really enjoyed them so to that point. I just haven't gotten further in it. So eventually I will. And then there's Knight's End, which is basically a kind of like a fae court series. I think I was given that one. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't read it, but one day I will. And then there is Lisa Gardner. Maggie's Man. Literally don't know anything about that. That was a free book. Excuse me. Hannah Howell. Probably my favorite Scottish romance author. I love them, especially Beauty and the Beast. That book, man, so many feels for that every single time. I've read a ton of her books, either through the library or ebooks, but these are the only ones that I have physically. And then Real Murders by Charlaine Harris. So, I haven't read that. I think that one's a cozy mystery. I don't really know how I feel about cozy mysteries. I've never read them before, so that'll probably be my first. And then down here, we have Nora Roberts. So these are all of her standalone kind of crime fiction. And I basically have them in publication order. I have read a majority of these, but not all of them. Eventually, I will get to all of them, though. So I would highly recommend The Search and The Witness. Those are probably my 2 most recent favorites. And then there's some more. Inner Harbor, Rising Tides, Sea Swept, and Chesapeake Blue are actually a quartet. Okay, so yeah, they are a quartet, and they are about men who were adopted out of the foster care system and were raised by like a super awesome mother and father team, and there is a big bombshell release in the first book that they basically have to uncover for their family. It's really, really good, but because it does talk about topics of like child abuse, so be aware of that. And then the Lovers and Dreamers, which is a bind up of a trilogy. I have not read this, but because it was a bind up, I couldn't resist. So, one day. And then the very bottom shelf are a lot of her quartets and trilogies. I will say that these have a formulaic aspect to it. So if you ever want to like read a bunch of her books, I would not suggest binging her trilogies and quartets like back to back, because you will definitely recognize a pattern, but there's that kind of like easy aspect where it's an easy read that I really enjoy about it. So she does everything from contemporary to crime to mystical fantasy to like pretty dark fantasy, and like regular crime. Everything. That's one of the things I really love about Nora Roberts. She can touch everything and do it pretty damn well. And then there's a couple of single titles, and then another trilogy, and I think this is a bind up time and again. Haven't read it yet. There's quite a few trilogies / quartets that I haven't read. I think my justification for all these books is that it's a stockpile, right? So whenever I get bored of something, I have a nice selection to choose from. And then you've heard me talk about First Grave on the Right by Dorinda Jones. Still haven't started reading that yet. Okay. See, now I'm just now remembering there's a pause button where I can like try to reduce the shakiness. Sorry about it being so shaky, by the way. If you're sticking around, I am surprised. But this entire series by Kim Harrison, I have not read it, but I bought it because it was recommended to me. Literally, all I know about it is that it's a witch, and she goes through trials and tribulations, and then it wraps up. This series I have talked about by Faith Hunter. It's the Skinwalker series or the Jane Yellow Rock series. Very, very good. The Blood of the Earth, Curse of the Land, and Flame in the Dark are kind of a spin-off. I haven't read them yet because I haven't gotten to the point at which they start in the series. But this will also be talked about in my Urban Fantasy Top 5 Wednesday. And then we have Larissa Ione. She writes a basically demon series. That's what it is. It's about demons. And it's about the different types of demons. And it's pretty smutty. And I really enjoy it. And spliced kind of in the middle there is a quartet about the four horsemen. Eternal Rider, Immortal Rider, Lethal Rider, and Rogue Rider. Man, these books are so good and such an interesting take on Christian mythology. So, highly recommend that if you're not super religious and offended about a different take on events. And then, again, another series that I have not read at all, but I bought because people highly recommended it to me. Jim Butcher, the Dresden Files. So, from what I understand, he is a warlock and kind of a detective / crime fighter in a urban fantasy world. I think it takes place in Chicago. I could be wrong. I haven't read anything. Eventually. And then more books that I haven't read, but I bought because they all sounded like super interesting. So I have The Waking Land, Kings of the Wild, The Invisible Library, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Girl with All the Gifts, Red Rising, Golden Sun, Morning Star. And then I have Dead Iron, which is like a steampunky novel from what I can tell, and that was also a freebie book. Half Resurrection Blues by Daniel Jose Older. This is a urban fantasy book. I started reading that, and I don't think me and him are going to get along with his writing style, but I haven't finished the book. Eventually, maybe. Who knows? And then Hounded, Hexed, and Hammered. These are actually not in the order that I would normally put them for Kevin Hearn. Hounded is the first book. I actually did not like it when I physically read it, but the audiobook made it super enjoyable. So I might just read all the books audiobooks and get rid of the physical books so I can free up some space. Who knows? And then because the movie was coming out and I was super interested by the premise, I bought Annihilation, Authority, and Acceptance. I'm also trying to break into like the pretty like hardcore science fiction is what I guess this is about. So the first book's pretty small. If I like it and I can get through it, then I won't feel so bad about having bought the other ones. And then I have Station 11, which I've heard nothing but good things about, and so I can't wait to read it. And that's another kind of post-apocalyptic story, but I heard it's not super action-packed, which I don't hate, so I'm interested to see what it's about. And then we have The Library at Mount Char, because Megan from the restricted section loves this book and highly recommends it all the time. And, you know, I gotta just take Megan's recommendation because she's Megan. Isn't that cheesy? I'm a loser. Anyways. The Night Circus. Heard about it because, why can't I remember her name? The Clockwork Reader. Hannah! Okay. Hannah at the Clockwork Reader. She raves about this book. This is her favorite book in the entire world. I'm intrigued by the premise, so one day I will actually read it and see if I like it. The Cottingley Secret. It was on the table for buy two, get one free, and it had an interesting premise, which I can't remember now, but I know that's the only reason why I would have bought it, was if it was interesting. I think it has to deal with fairies in like World War I or II. So it's kind of like magical realism. Kind of light and fluffy. I don't know. We will see one day. And then I have George R.R. Martin. So I have The World of Ice and Fire, which is basically like a history book on everything. It's super interesting. Really awesome detail and artwork in there. And then I have the 4 volumes of the first book, Game of Thrones, in graphic novel form. I love this graphic novel adaptation of Game of Thrones. It is beautiful and it's amazing. Then there is the Mystery Knight graphic novel, which, if I remember correctly, it's an already published short story that they just adapted. I haven't read it yet. I kind of don't want to until I've actually finished reading Game of Thrones or The Song of Ice and Fire, all the books, and then I want to read that. But who knows when that's going to happen. So I've read Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings. I got like 200 pages into Storm of Swords, and I just like hit the hardest reading slump ever, and I've just not ever picked it back up. So I have the rest of them. Eventually. Maybe that's just what I'll title this entire series. Eventually. Then I was given The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and then I bought The Wise Man's Fear because I assumed I was going to be able to just binge these 2 books and like fall in love with them. Well, I started reading The Name of the Wind, and Kvothe irritates me. He is kind of douchebaggy, in my opinion. So, maybe, who knows, one day. And then we have The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. It seemed interesting, so I picked it up for cheap, and I haven't even tried to read it. I think it's an assassin story. So, eventually. And then also by Brent Weeks, The Black Prism and The Blinding Knife. These were actually on the table for buy two get one free, so these were really cheap. And I figured, since I'm really trying to get into like kind of like higher fantasy, these would be a good start. And then I have The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden and The Girl in the Tower. I read The Bear and the Nightingale because it was like new authors to check out like a month after it was released. I loved it. I devoured it. And then I got The Girl in the Tower as soon as it released. And as you can see, I really haven't even read it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know. So then we have Brandon Sanderson. I have not read a single book by him. Yeah. Buying habits. And while I get down on the floor here, then I have some Neil Gaiman books. I have never read any of his books, but these are all ones that I picked because, from what I understand, they're probably like the easiest to kind of start off in reading, because they're either short or just have like a pretty simple style. I bought the Magicians trilogy because I saw the TV show be adapted for Netflix and I wanted to read the books first. Still haven't read them. Then we have the All Souls trilogy. I've heard nothing but good things about this, so I bought it for really cheap. Still haven't read it. And then The Smell of Other People's Houses. I think I saw this on Book Outlet and it was recommended. And this was basically straight up a cover buy because I literally don't know what it's about. But I have heard good things. But I've tried not to like hear detailed information about it. And then Amazon recommended The Shadow of What Was Lost. Literally don't know. I don't know. The Inheritance trilogy. Again, fantasy. Trying to like get into it. Have not read it. This is a bind up of 4 books. The Queen of the Tyrling and The Fate of the Tyrling. I'm missing the second book. Honestly, I can't get through the first book. I don't know if I'll be able to finish it. So I might end up unhauling these. Children of Earth and Sky. I had a lot of money one month and I decided to just go on a fucking spending spree. As you can tell. I don't know. I don't remember. It had an interesting premise. That's all I know. Nevernight and Godsgrave. Haven't read it because I'm afraid of the hype, but I bought it because of the hype. I don't know what's wrong with me. Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I did not realize that there are actually 2 series before this that are... Supposedly you can read this without reading those 2. But I haven't picked it up because a part of me wants to read those 2 series first. They're just trilogies, from what I can tell. The Jade City by Fonda Lee. It sounded really interesting because it's supposed to be mafia steampunk from Japan or China? Japanese or Chinese inspired. I can't remember which. Eventually. And then kind of going with the Asian fantasy influence, Ken Liu, The Grace of Kings, and The Wall of Storms. These sound so good, but they're intimidating as fuck because those books are huge. And I'm scared. And then The Tiger and the Wolf by Adrian Chikos. Nope, can't pronounce it. And then The Bear and the Serpent. So I saw these floating around in kind of like my recommendation section and never looked at the premise until Lauren from the Novelesh bought them. And when she explained them, I was like, okay, now I have to get it. I don't know. Roman shapeshifting? Not Roman. Russian shapeshifting, I think. Where shapeshifters are like the only creatures on Earth. I don't know. It sounded interesting. And then we have Uprooted by Naomi Novak, another kind of like Russian inspired fantasy. And then we have The Golem and the Genie which was on a buy two get one free table, and I picked it up because I really wanted to see how a golem and a genie, which are from two different like religious faiths, were gonna interact. Still haven't read it, but I want to. The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Yep, don't know how to say that last name. If you haven't heard about this, you've been living under a rock, and I haven't read it yet because I'm afraid of the hype. Even though I bought it because of the hype. The Queen of Blood. It sounded really interesting, and it actually seemed like it would be kind of an easy read. I just haven't picked it up because I'm not in the mood. Lost Gods. Super weird premise. Guy goes to jail and then gets released, but his entire family's killed, so then he has to go into purgatory to save them? Maybe? Maybe that's how it's supposed to be? It's got pictures in it. I was intrigued. Haven't read it yet. The Explorers Guild by John Baird and Kevin Costner. I was intrigued, one, because it was partly written by Kevin Costner, and then two, it has almost a graphic novel feel to it, because it has a lot of pictures, but it also has it's kind of like Illuminae, but done in like late 1800s, early 1900s map style. So, interesting. Then The Immortals and Winter of the Gods, recommended to me by Amazon, and I bought it. Basically, I think it's Artemis is living on Earth in New York. Interesting. And then Passion Play, Queen's Hunt, and Allegiance was recommended to me on Book Outlet, and Book Outlet didn't have all the books, nor were they all in the same format. So this is kind of irritating to me, but it seemed interesting. All of these books by Elizabeth Bear, recommended to me by Book Outlet, and I was on a buying spree. I really don't know what these are about. I don't. The Fire Sermon by Francesca Haig. This is the first book in a trilogy, I believe. It was for sale at Barnes & Noble, and it's dystopian where everybody is born as a twin, and one twin is destined or is fated to be like the healthy, good twin for the good of the race, and the other twin is the bad, deformed, has magic, evil twin. It sounded super intriguing. I did not make that sound intriguing. And then The Witch Who Came In From the Cold. This was just interesting based on how many different authors are a part of it. I don't know how this will turn out, but from what I can tell, a little bit of fantasy